Hello, Business Life Science subscribers. This was recorded on Thursday, February 8th, 2018. So we're going to jump over to Stephen Ben-Danoon's channel. He's got some big news, and we're going to look at the impact here. So he's going to talk about the U.S. strike in Syria. We're just going to watch this real briefly.
And what we're seeing right now is very disturbing coming out of Syria near Deir ez-Zor there. From what we're understanding right now, this is from a French paper, Torto.com, JacquesTorto.com is a French paper. We did use the translator to translate the article. I was already seeing reports from our own sources there on the ground in Syria that indeed U.S. warplanes had struck the Syrian military, killing 100 people thus far, including in that are Russian contractors, military contractors there on the ground.
Okay, so that's Stephen Ben-Danoon. Let's jump over to CNN. CNN's report here, U.S. coalition strike kills pro-regime forces in Syria. It's kind of worded funny here. Let's read what CNN says. The U.S.-led coalition fighting ISIS in Syria conducted air and artillery strikes against pro-regime forces in Syria on Wednesday, killing an estimated 100 pro-regime fighters, according to a coalition statement. Just as an aside, because I have to grade papers, if a student handed me this sentence, I would say you have to rewrite it. I mean, this is really interesting. The U.S.-led coalition fighting the U.S.-led coalition, comma, which should be there, fighting ISIS in Syria, comma, conducted air and artillery strikes against pro-regime forces in Syria on Wednesday. Run-on sentence here, killing an estimated 100 pro-regime fighters, finally a comma, according to a coalition statement. Let's unpack this. Let's unpack this for the Business Life Science channel. So, the U.S. is fighting ISIS in Syria, but so is Assad. Assad and his forces, and the Russians are fighting ISIS as well. And there's other regimes, there's other parties in Syria as well. So the U.S.-led coalition fired air and artillery strikes against pro-regime forces. Now maybe these are irregulars. They're like Viet Cong, you know, in the Vietnam War. These are not uniformed. I don't know. But according to Stephen Ben-Danoon just a second ago on his channel, he's saying that Russian contractors were also killed. That's a big deal. That's a pretty big deal for 100 people to be killed. Now, I don't know what city this is in. Let's see what Stephen Ben-Danoon has to say. Okay, so it looks like it's near a city here. CNN, let's see what they say. According to a coalition statement, its strikes were carried out after forces allied with Syrian President Bashar al-Assad, quote, initiated an unprovoked attack against a well-established Syrian Democratic Forces headquarters where coalition advisors were working with U.S.-backed Syrian fighters. This is this controversial democratically backed forces that, supposedly democratic backed forces that the U.S. is backing. This is kind of a John McCain system that's been put in there. Some 500 pro-regime troops carried out attack using artillery, mortar fire, and Russian-made tanks. What appears to be a coordinated attack on Syrian Democratic Forces. So we have a big proxy war going on here. So we have our proxies in, the Russians have their proxies, and then the Syrians attacked our proxy force, and then we counterattacked and killed, you know, the Syrian army or irregulars and Russians. This could be a prelude to the Third World War. In my opinion, there is no strategic advantage to be in Syria other than they want that pipeline and the oil that's in Syria. Of course, if they'd listen to Elon Musk and go to electric and do everything that Elon Musk is doing, they wouldn't have to fight over any oil anymore. They could get rid of this whole problem because we could go to the electric cars that Elon Musk is putting in. Just pulling a wild guess out of the air, within 10 years, electric cars will be the norm and gasoline combustion cars will be specialty cars, maybe for tanker trucks or big big vehicles that, earth movers and stuff that still need that powerful engine. But for the majority of the lightweight vehicles that people use, electric cars will be fine. So we're fighting and killing and maybe provoking a war over an oil pipeline that in 10 years may not even have any relevance. So we have a spokesman here, U.S. Army Colonel Thomas Veal. Colonel Veal says that about 20 to 30 artillery tanks and rounds landed within 500 meters of the Syrian Democratic Force headquarters before the U.S.-backed fighters and coalition forces targeted the aggressors with a combination of air and artillery strikes. So what we heard there, that 20 to 30 artillery and tank rounds landed within 500 meters. Didn't hit anybody. Notice that. Didn't hit anybody. It was in 500 meters. Maybe these are warning shots. Maybe these were shots across the bow. And I am no friend of Bashar Assad at all. But then the counterstrike, the U.S. strikes were carried out by manned and unmanned aircraft as well as U.S. high-mobility artillery rocket systems, HIMARS, two military officials told CNN. U.S. F-22 stealth jets, F-15 fighters, and MQ-9 drones were involved in the counterattack, according to U.S. forces. This is pretty dangerous. So the Bashar Assad's and the Russian-backed forces shot artillery shells within 500 meters. The U.S. military counterattack, again, from what I just read in CNN, no one was killed on the Democratic forces. And that it was an unprovoked attack, and that the counterattack killed 100. That seems to be, there should have been like a hotline between Washington and Moscow. There should be discussions going on saying, hey, your forces are firing within 500 meters. Call them off immediately or we're going to counterattack. Did that take place? I don't know. Veal said no coalition or U.S. personnel had been killed or wounded in the engagement, but that one member of the Syrian Democratic Forces was wounded. The coalition said the attack took place in Qumsham in the middle Euphrates River Valley, 5 miles east of the agreed-on deconfliction zone. Deconfliction zone. The old term would be demilitarized zone. Deconfliction line, designated to separate Russian-backed regime troops and U.S.-backed forces in Syria. Veal said the coalition suspected that pro-regime forces would attempt to seize territory, suspected, not proven, including lucrative oil fields, that the Syrian Democratic Forces had liberated from ISIS in September. They were likely seeking to seize oil fields in Qumsham that had been a major source of revenue for the Daesh, ISIS, from 2014 to 2017. He said, using the Arabic acronym for ISIS. Okay, now CNN is talking about the Russian hotline. According to another U.S. official who spoke to CNN, said it was unclear exactly who the pro-regime forces were, but that the U.S. is looking into whether Russian contractors operating in the vicinity might have been involved. This official added that there is no direct evidence yet that the Russians had fired on the Syrian Democratic Forces facility where the U.S. advisors were located. They have not ruled out that Iranian-backed forces might have also been involved in the attack. Okay, so we're building up for a third world war. Let's go back to Stephen Ben-Noon real quick.
This is going to be a major escalation. According to a combined joint task force command by the U.S. reporting about this, it was indeed the Syrian government targeting Free Syrian Army forces. They said here, an unprovoked attack by the Syrian pro-regime forces prompts coalition defensive strikes. Syrian pro-regime forces initiated an unprovoked attack against a well-established Syrian Democratic Forces headquarters February the 2nd.
So what I see there, just, there was an attack, but was in 500 meters. Okay, so it was in 500 meters. Was it a warning shot? Were they trying to zero in? Were they trying to vector in? And they were getting close to vectoring in on that. And that's what the U.S. said, hey, they're going to vector in here shortly. We got to destroy them. But again, there doesn't seem to be a hotline between Russia and the United States, between Moscow and Washington, between the U.S. forces and the Russian forces. And there needs to be a hotline here. We just saw on the other channel, there's this, what's a deconfliction line? That's a very difficult thing to say. Deconfliction line. Here it is. Deconfliction line. Confliction line? That's a new military term. Let's just call it a demilitarized zone. Okay, this is a demilitarized zone. This is a neutral zone, put in Star Trek terms. This is where you Russians and the Syrians stay there, the U.S. and the Democrats stay here, because we don't want to start firing at each other and start a third world war. This is dangerous. Let's look at this from a business standpoint for a second. So I have two contending forces that could destroy each other. It seems reasonable in the world of cell phones and satellite phones and YouTube channels that there has to be a hotline between Washington and Moscow, between the Defense Department, U.S. Defense Department, and the Russian Defense Department, they're the equivalent, so that we don't have an escalation to get people killed. If Ben Danoon is right, and he's saying that Russians were killed, you think this guy over here is going to be okay with that?
7. Now, I do not know what Syria's response is to this, but then again, it kind of makes you wonder, why is the Free Syrian Army allowed to be able to continue to take land away from the Syrian government?
Okay, now, so Stephen Ben Danoon obviously has a slant, a bias that, in my opinion, and if I'm wrong, I'll be willing to retract it, but in my opinion, Stephen Ben Danoon has a pro-Russian stance. He's allowed to have a pro-Russian stance, that's fine. But, so, my point is slightly different. I don't know why the United States is in there in the first place. There is no strategic existential threat that Syria poses against us. We do not need to be backing this Free Syrian Army. You know, this is a civil war that needs to be dealt with the United Nations interceding and trying to reestablish this country under one unified government. Of course, the Defense Department seems to think that Bashar Assad must be destroyed at all costs. He's not an existential threat against the United States. He's not even a threat against Israel. So we're in a war just for the sake of being in a war. This is just another proxy war we're involved where people are getting killed. And now, you know, because of, it could be a miscalculation. Maybe the people firing on the U.S. forces or the democratically backed forces the U.S. is backing in this proxy war, maybe they misunderstood. Maybe the Iranians are trying to provoke a war. There's a lot of cloud of uncertainty here. But the one thing that all of us agree, we better agree, there better not be a war between Russia and the United States. And all forces need to step back. And just from a business analysis, looking at this as in a frame of business, there has to be open communication between Vladimir Putin and Trump, between the Russian military. There has to be an immediate tribunal set up or system where we can manage this situation so it doesn't escalate and get people killed. So 500 shots are fired at the democratically the U.S. government's proxy rebels in Syria. A counterattack using aircraft, mobile artillery, and drones kills potentially 100 people. According to Ben Danoon, maybe even Russian contractors, this could escalate into Third World War. I'm not trying to be an alarmist. I'm simply saying if we don't get communication in here and get some protocols and controls and rules of engagement, we can have a major catastrophe from this. Okay, this is Business Life Sciences. This is recorded on Thursday, February 8, 2018. Let's keep an eye on this. More on this channel on the current Dow Jones situation and how money, finance, again, at the end of the day, money makes the world go round. That's why we do Business Life Sciences. Money is what drives a lot of these conflicts and this misunderstandings, this killing and death. We have to, if we're going to use money and be controlled by money, then we have to understand the life, the sciences, and the life and death power that business has over everything. I like to put things in this channel through a business lens and try to analyze it as a business because, again, all this stuff's about money. You know, you saw in the CNN article that there's oil in Syria that they want. They were likely seizing. They were likely seeking to seize oil fields in Kusham that had been a major source of revenue for Daesh, ISIS, from 2014 to 2017. So right there's a motivation for money. So this stuff, deep down, all this becomes business. War is a business, and it's a deadly business that can get us all killed. Keep studying. This is Business Life Science. Stay safe.